Hello everybody, my name is Roger and welcome to my channel, Roger's Reads. So sorry I've been kind of missing in action for a while, but I've had this really bad bug that had a hard time getting rid of, an awful chest cold. But it's still kind of hanging on, but I'm feeling a little bit better, so if my voice fades in and out, you have to bear with me. So today I'm doing my September wrap-up, and as usual I put links to all of the books that I mentioned in the video in the comment section below, so you can check them out if you like. If you want to also jump to a specific part of the video where I talk about a specific book, I've also listed the times during the video where I talk about each book, so you can watch only those books that you're interested in hearing about if you so choose. So let's get cracking. So the first book that I read this month was entitled Body Swap by Sylvia McNichol. So the story starts out with a fatal car accident where Susan, an 82-year-old woman, runs over a 15-year-old girl named Haley with her Hurricane SUV. So they both awake at some sort of otherworldly carnival where Haley accuses the older woman of carelessly running her over. So Susan claims that the gas pedal stuck and that the accident wasn't her fault. So the two of them begin to argue and they end up managing to persuade the powers that be to give them both another chance. So they are both sent back to Earth to discover the true cause of the accident. The kicker is that they each awake in the other's body. So 15-year-old Haley is now in the body of an 82-year-old woman, and Susan is now in the youthful body of a 15-year-old. You know, I've always enjoyed the body switching trope in which each person views life from the perspective of the other. Like movies such as Freaky Friday, Big, and 18 Again come to mind. So in this book, I enjoyed how the two main characters had to figure out how to live in the other's body and deal with all the challenges that come with it. So up until now, Haley, the 15-year-old, was a self-obsessed, phone-addicted teen whose primary focus was attracting the attention of a particular boy that she was crushing on. Now Susan, on the other hand, was dealing with her son who not only treated her as though she were a child, but was also intent on placing her in a nursing home. Haley and Susan were pretty much two people who couldn't have been more different. It's also worth mentioning that there is a race against the clock theme here. Haley and Susan must work together to determine the real cause of the accident before time runs out, although we don't want to know exactly what's going to happen when time does run out. And what I especially enjoyed is how the two of them became devoted and fierce friends, each looking out for the other and evolved as characters. So in this way, this story is a lesson in empathy and selflessness and what it's like to walk in somebody else's shoes. So that being said, the character development in this story was phenomenal, as both women learn the importance of respecting and understanding others who are different from themselves. They also discover that there's plenty to learn from each other and both attain a new level of wisdom by walking in the other's shoes. So though there was a serious undertone to the story, there were also plenty of hilarious moments, like their interactions with their friends and family. There are plenty of laugh-out-loud mishaps and misadventures as they try to navigate life as in their new body, which of course is what makes body swap stories so much fun. Now the only problem I had with the novel was that it wasn't always easy to picture the correct character during the narrative. So for example, Susan refers to Haley as Susan, even though Haley looks like Susan. So likewise, Susan's friends and family referred to Susan as Haley. And when they're in the presence of each other, Susan refers to Haley as Susan, and Haley refers to Susan as Haley. Confused? Yes, from time to time I was too. So because of this, I feel that the body swap trope works much better on the screen than it does in a novel. Though I did get the hang of it as the story progressed, it was a tad confusing and disconcerting initially. All in all, this was an enjoyable and meaningful read with interesting characters. To be honest, I was expecting more fluff, but there was a delightful substance to this story, and I adore being surprised. Not to mention, the ending was very satisfying, and I love the full circle nature of the story. So I thought the author did an excellent job of telling the story from each character's perspective. And I really enjoyed the witty banter between Haley and Susan. The dynamic between the main characters was believable and relevant. So Body Swap ended up being a beautifully written, fascinating and insightful book with two very different perspectives, and is well worth the read in my opinion. So the next book that I read was entitled Less by Andrew Sean Greer. Now this book was a Pulitzer Prize winner for fiction in 2018, right? I believe it was 2018, and is named after a main protagonist, Arthur Less, a fumbly, insecure gay man who is about to turn 50 and whose latest manuscript has just been rejected by his long-term publisher. Now, to make matters even worse, a wedding invitation arrives in the mail announcing that Arthur's boyfriend of the past 9 years, Freddie, is marrying someone else. Hell, Arthur didn't even know that the relationship was over. So he certainly wasn't about to attend the wedding because that would be majorly awkward, but to refuse would look petty. So deeply discouraged and more than a bit heartbroken, Arthur does what anybody else would do in such a situation: run away. So as it turns out, Arthur has a stack of nearly forgotten bookish invites to various literary events around the world: Italy, France, Morocco, Japan, India, Germany. So Arthur decides to accept every invitation, award ceremony, speaking engagement, and teaching opportunity that was sent his way, and embark on an around-the-world adventure. After all, what could possibly go wrong? So what follows is a zany series of misadventures, misunderstandings, missteps, and more than a few personal humiliations as Arthur attempts to run away from his problems, or at least momentarily forget about them, which he discovers isn't easy to do. So along the way, he reminisces about his life, he meets up with former lovers and aging friends, makes new friends, and even comes close to falling in love. So the story takes bits and pieces of his current life and his memories and weaves them together into a powerful and insightful narrative, and the author does it with wit and with humor. So this quirky book ponders many of life's important questions, universal questions, so that in a way it was entirely relatable. Now it was especially relatable for me, being a gay male in his 50s, but I also think that the universal nature of the themes in this book, such as love, loss, nostalgia, lost opportunities, growing older, disappointment, searching for meaning in our life, and acceptance would render it relatable to most people. So this poignant and thought-provoking book had me right from the get-go. I thought it was beautifully written and meaningful, with wonderfully descriptive scenes and lush, rich prose. So this was an intoxicating and deeply engaging read with plenty of humor and heart, and I ended up loving the quirky character of Arthur Less. I was also pleased with the emotional and entirely satisfying ending, which clinched its 5-star rating for me. So the next book that I ended up reading this month was entitled Rule by Ellen Goodlett. So Rule follows 3 secretive women, Sophie, Akela, and Ren, each of whom harbors a dark, traitorous secret that would no doubt lead to their execution if word ever got out. So when the king of Colonia summons them to the palace, they each believe that someone has discovered their secret and that their days are numbered. They're sure that they're going to be hanging from the gallows in the coming days. But King Andros has summoned the girls for an entirely different reason. You see, the king is dying, and his only son has recently been murdered, leaving no heir to the throne, except, that is, for Sophie, Akela, and Ren, his 3 illegitimate daughters that nobody knew about. So the king tells the 3 women that they will train and work with him in the coming days, and that he will choose one of them to be his successor. So now they must compete with one another to prove themselves worthy of the throne of Colonia. So a rivalry develops between the three half-sisters, as only one of them can be chosen as heir. However, there was someone out there who doesn't want any of them to rule. Someone who knows each of their secrets and has resorted to blackmail to keep them from the throne. So the strange blackmailer has given each of them the same choice. Leave Colonia or their secret will be revealed. So as the danger to the sisters escalates, they begin working together, each using her own natural talents to try to stop their blackmailer. So what follows is a fast-paced story of political intrigue, magic, blackmail, there's deceit, there's dangerous plots, complicated romances, and an enthralling mystery. I found the characters likable and relatable with distinct personalities and character voices. Now the only thing that bothered me regarding the story's plot was the magic system. So in this story, people use a form of magic called the arts. And the arts consist of blood magic tithing, which provides increased speed, strength, and stamina. So to activate the magic, you have to actually cut yourself to draw blood. So I found the magic system a bit disturbing in that one had to resort to self-mutilation to trigger their magic. Now, I'm not a fan of cutting to begin with, but I felt especially uncomfortable by this particular system of magic, or any magic system for that matter, which involves self-harm to bring forth power. So magic system aside, the novel had my attention until the very end and had me on the edge of my seat the entire time. And then came the end and it all went to hell. Or should I say it didn't go anywhere. The story ended on a disappointing cliffhanger in which there was no resolution to the plot thread. Literally nothing in the story was resolved. It just fizzled out. In fact, the ending was so abrupt that I felt that the author terminated the story in the middle of a chapter. It is my humble opinion that if a novel cannot stand on its own, then the author has failed. Truth be told, after I turned the last page of this book, I actually felt robbed. Robbed that I wasted 3 days reading this novel only to end up with absolutely nothing. It's a shame, really, as I was really enjoying the story right until the end, and I probably would have been a 4-star read for me. But given that it's only a half-finished book, the most I can give it is 2 stars. Now, if you personally don't mind cliffhangers, then you might want to give Rule a try, as it is quite a gripping story. Unfortunately, the cliffhanger ending killed it for me, so I won't be continuing with this series. So the next book that I read this month was entitled Cabin at the End of the World, written by Paul Tremblay. So this is a horror novel which follows 7-year-old Wen and her 2 parents, Eric and Andrew, who are vacationing at a remote cabin on a quiet New Hampshire lake. So one afternoon, as Wen was catching grasshoppers out in the front yard, a large stranger named Leonard unexpectedly appears in the driveway. He's young, friendly, and he wins the little girl over almost instantly. So they talk and play for a while until Leonard abruptly apologizes and tells Wen that nothing that's going to happen is your fault. Then 3 more strangers appear at the cabin carrying menacing homemade weapons. So Wen runs inside to warn her parents, and as she does so, Leonard calls out, "Your dads won't let us in, Wen, but they have to. We need your help to save the world." So the 4 strangers plead with Wen, Andrew, and Eric to let them in, that they have to, that the fate of the entire world is at stake, but the 3 of them refuse. Eventually, the 4 strangers manage to break in, and there are injuries as a result. So the story then turns into a tense and gripping home invasion tale of survival, which is personally a trope that scares the bejesus out of me. So once the 4 of them have subdued Wen and her dads, they explain that Wen, Andrew, and Eric need to make a sacrifice, an ultimate sacrifice within the next 24 hours or so. If not, the world will be destroyed. So the question is, are the four strangers cultists or crazies, or is the world indeed on the brink of an apocalypse? So the book did an excellent job at building up suspense and paranoia as the remote little cabin turned into a house of horrors complete with a torture chamber. I was pretty much on the edge of my seat during the entire time, waiting to see what was going to happen next and whether that which the four strangers had predicted would come to pass. That is, whether the world really was on the brink of collapse. Now, I will say that some of the violence that takes place is described in very gory, vivid, and disturbing ways, so more sensitive readers might want to pass on this one. I personally like a good horror novel, so it didn't bother me too much, though it definitely was disturbing. This was definitely an uncomfortable book, a real psychological thriller whose tension escalated as time passed in the cabin. Though it was a suspenseful and gripping read with well-developed characters, at the end of it all, it just didn't work out for me and turned out to be yet another disappointing read for me this month. The main reason was the ending. Let me just say, if you like a nice resolution to a story, then this book isn't for you. This is the kind of book that leaves you with more questions than answers, and you have an unsatisfied feeling after turning the last page, or at least I did. It seemed like the author spent the entire novel building up this incredible amount of suspense, only to have it fizzle out at the story's end. I expected more of a dramatic ending and an answer to the story's main questions. So the payoff just wasn't there for me. Now, if you don't mind somewhat vague endings or experimental novels, then by all means you'll give Cabin at the End of the World a try. It just wasn't for me. So I think I'm going to stop there for the time being. I believe I have 4 more books to discuss. So stay tuned for my September wrap-up, part 2. As always, I thank you so much for your watching. I really appreciate all your support. Oh, and also if you like this video, I really appreciate if you click the like button below. It really helps me out. So that is it for this time. I will talk to you in the next video. Roger and out.